SATSANG 5. AYOUN. Malaga. July 7, 2019. We're talking about what you want. Silence. Laughs. So who's throwing? Sister, it's like I'm empty-headed. I can't think anymore. Claude, you want to talk? Laughs. Sister, can you explain a little bit about Guatemala's report with today? The relationship between. Sister, Guatemala. No, the report simply reads as follows. As everything was written, well, last year, we demonstrated it with the songs, Paradise Blank, Purple Rain and all that. Today, we see, all the brothers who read the posts of Laura who publishes, every day of this year, the texts corresponding to the same days, but in the year 1944, correspond exactly to what we live, or when there is a SATSANG, as we talk about. This morning, I spoke about the gift. Until you have given, you cannot be free. That is exactly what is written in dialogue with the angel, on the corresponding day. It is simply a statement that everything that has been written, as Buddha said when he was incarnated, that his words could not fail. At the time when he was saying these words, with people who were there, with him, in the satsangs he made, when he received people, no one could live it. People could feel the atmosphere that Buddha was creating, but they didn't live it. In the same way as Dialogue with the Angel, which is certainly the best-selling book in the spiritual world for 30, 40 years. Whatever the magnificent aspect or not, whether one found reading these transcriptions of Gita and the others, there, even if it was very beautiful, there was no possibility of living it. Simply put, what was said at the time, in 1944, corresponds exactly, day by day, to what is happening now. Sister. Yes, but you don't have a specific example in mind. I just gave you the specific example. Here, in today's text, that is to say, that of July 7, 1944, we find exactly what I said this morning in Satsang. Totally. Sister. And it stops, the dialogues, they stop on what date? Dialogue with the Angel stops at the end of, Dialogues with the Angel stops, I think, at the end of the war. Sister. Yes, but what month? And we realize, as I explained last year, when we lived it, for the songs, with videos, that the videos we made, video clips, on songs, whether it was Michael Berger, Purple Rain, Prince, and so many others, illustrated exactly the truth that was experienced last year. The installation of La Paradise Blank, in fact, there were countless songs that we had put on last year. It was a demonstration that everything was written, and what is interesting is the synchronicity of each day with what was written in 1944. So, everything was written, as I said. Everything is a video game, but applies, whether it was received 2,000 years ago by Christ, whether it was received in dialogue with the angel or in songs, it's exactly the same thing. It is the proof that, obviously, the Paradise Blank, at the time, we could find it beautiful, listen to it all the time when Michael Berger came out. But there was no possible understanding or living experience. It was poetic, it was beautiful. Like all the people who read dialogues with the angel, and there are countless others, we could find Archangel Uriel's prose magnificent, perfect, but it was still poetry. It wasn't active in the real world. Today, it is active in the real world. And there is a total overlap between the years 1944, 43-44, and 2018, 2019. I'm even sure that by digging a little deeper into dialogues with the angel, if you look between now, July, and December 1944, there will certainly be a day that corresponds to the event. Sister. Yes, that's why I was asking you when it was over. There you go. Sister. When they were, dialogues with the angel was received for a period of time, after which it is all the teaching and living experience of Guatemala. Sister. Yes, because some of them have been gassed. There were several of them, 4. Yes. Sister. Some of them have been gassed. Yes, then some of them died too. Sister. She had warned that they would be arrested and die. In the gas chambers. What word she had? Sister. That they had been arrested, that they would be arrested and die in the gas chambers. That's right. That's right. Only Guatemala, who was the last living, was the ambassador, if I may say so, of the book. Guatemala, you know that when she died, she sent her death notice a week before she died, announcing the time and day of her death. Sister. Wow. I didn't know that. She was perfectly aware that she was going to leave on such and such a day, such and such a time. Because the angel warned her a week before, so she wrote her own death notice, which she sent to people to receive on the day of her death. Brother. That's funny, that's funny. It's a last wink. Laughs. The story just keeps happening. Each time, it turns in a loop, but with a spiral, it's not a perfect circle, each time we go back. In fact, all year round, we only go back to dates called birthdays. Of oneself or of everything, but every time, with an octave higher. Sister. And a smaller amplitude, at the spring level. I mean, a smaller amplitude, if we take, the central axis, yes. The spiral, can effectively become a spring. That is, you can adapt, stretch the spring or compress it. Sister. And also in terms of distance from the axis, it narrows as you go along, that's it. You count the number of turns, anyway. It is the normal process of life, locked or not, to make loops. So in Tao, we were talking about the hub of the wheel that allows the wheel to turn. The wheel of karma that, you have it in the wheel of fortune or the wheel of life, simply. And when we speak, for example, of the infinite presence, the ultimate presence or the extinction of consciousness, the junction of being and non-being, as I explained, when you are settled there, you see all the worlds, but you are no longer attracted. You remain the hub of the wheel, that is, what allows movement, but is not movement. The principle of Taoism, that's it. We find it in Chinese medicine, for example, we talk about the 5 movements of life. Movement of wood, fire, earth, metal and water. And that all life is punctuated by these 5 movements. With 2 aspects, what the Chinese call the inside out, the Shaolin, they consider it, a garment. You have the visible face of the garment and the lining of the garment. But it's just a suit, it's just a garment. But all life manifests itself in this way, inside out and movement, 5 movements. But these 5 movements only exist because there is a place of manifestation. They call it the center place of life, the earth, but this center place of life also has an origin that they call the center source of life, which is the hub of the wheel. And the hub of the wheel is the best image, in any case, in Chinese symbolism, of what allows movement that participates in all movements, but is not movement. It is the junction of being and non-being. And it is the lighting, precisely, of being and non-being, that is exactly what we are living at the moment, which makes it possible to understand that we are no form, no world and no movement. And that we are the ones who created the dream, in the same way. But you only notice this when you are in the permanence of the fire of the Sacred Heart, as I said earlier, when all the movements of life appear to you, all the dimensions can appear to you, but it is not necessary. Simply, on this stage of theater, on this world, if you accept that, well, you too remain motionless. Events pass, things pass, but nothing is stopped. That's what we call transparency too. It means being able, naturally and spontaneously, without effort, to let life unfold without involving your life in it. It is at this moment that you are no longer your life but that you are life. The way, the truth, the life. This is the Christic state, what has been called the Son of Man in the Scriptures. The Son of Man is nothing other than man who has found his sacredness through his simplest humanity. That's what we're living, what I call the natural state, that's exactly what it is. The eternal I is, as Nisargadatta said in his lifetime, when you are the eternal I, or the absolute I, the eternal I who has never moved, the universe will pass, the creation will pass, that you will always be there. But I'm not addressing the character by saying that, of course. I'm addressing the immutable nucleus, the heart of the heart, the hub of the wheel, the immutable. Then, call it God, no matter, but you are indeed that, before you are a form, before you are a specificity, before you are a story. You have already been all the stories, all the scenarios, all the possible ones. It is not worthwhile, in rewinding the film, to dwell on the past sequences, but simply to note that the final point, in the end, is only the initial point. It is the illusion of the dream that created the distance between the alpha and the omega and the idea of having something to travel. But when you say, I am the alpha and the omega, as Christ said, you see that there is no more alpha than there is omega. That you remain immutable. This is what Christ prepared, what beings prepared during their passage on earth. Beyond the teachings given by humans, they have left a historical mark on history, which is a landmark that allows us to leave history behind. Corn at one point, these so-called historical landmarks, on which we have relied, vanish by themselves, but without effort. The hardest thing to accept, even today, for everyone is to accept that there is nothing you can do. And it is in this acceptance that simplicity is lived. As long as you believe you can do something about who you are, you can't be. Keep up the effort to drive, to make love, to pay your taxes, yes, but don't involve anything that is the truth in that. Everything that belongs to the theatre scene of our lives, in fact, has only been intended, in this life, to bring us back to this zero time. No matter what anyone says. And also remember that when I talk about acceptance, you cannot conceive or imagine that acceptance is an effort. As soon as the word acceptance brings about an effort in you, it is not true acceptance. Acceptance is never an effort. On the contrary, it is a relaxation. It is exactly the opposite. So, if in your intimate, personal or self-mechanism, you consider acceptance as an effort or movement, you cannot experience acceptance. Because you create a distance here too. And when I speak of acceptance, it is indeed the acceptance of the present instant, but, accepting the present instant and living the present instant, cannot be an effort. On the contrary, as I said, it is a relaxation. It is time for sacrifice. It is the moment, as Guatemala's text says today, of July 7, 1944, it is the moment, the light can only be given. You can only love by giving. It is never an acquisition. As long as you think that love is an acquisition, you're a predator towards yourself. And it causes suffering. Love can never be an effort or a progression. Vibration and consciousness, yes. That's all we've done with that, to get into vibrations, to get into consciousness. But at some point, this vestitude, deflates like a bladder and you discover that all this was part of the scenario we wrote, since we are one. And that seeing the written script, accepting it, is also freedom. True acceptance, if it remains in you the notion of an effort to be made or a work to be undertaken, whatever it may be, you put distance yourself. Acceptance in its original sense, all the words we have used, is the crossing, it is the obvious, it is the ease. When we say that love is simple, there is nothing simpler. It is always the filter of our history, our conceptions, our ideas, our references, that we make ourselves, spontaneously. Because as soon as you use the word love, of course, even if you put a qualifier behind it, unconditional, it is necessarily conditioned by your experience. Agape no. Beyond the vibrational, your brain has no possibility of representation. You can read the definition 1,000 times, it won't change anything. Your brain has no support or reference point. As long as you feel that there is a point of support, reference or comparison, you are not quite at the heart of the heart. You're just on the periphery, it's already huge. But in this phase of today, when we talked about simplicity, simplicity is never an effort. This is the path of childhood, this is the moment when you accept everything. That is, at that moment, it completely shatters the mind, at the chemical level in the brain, the sense of being an individual. But you can never force that. Once again, the end of the myth of immortality, or the myth of creation, or the dream, is only achieved through the frank acceptance of the instant. Enel has been telling me for years, hic and nunc, here and now. Because basically, and this is the vicious circle that we must see, without trying to break it, it breaks itself. As soon as you accept it, we all spend our time in loops. In feedback loops, even at the level of the brain, without stopping, to systematically press on yesterday, on our history, whether we like it or not. And this is the instant when you accept that whatever your story, whatever the pain, whatever the experiences, whatever the living of yesterday, it is of no use to you in the present instant. To accept this is to be free already. It is already releasing any claim of the ego or self to acquire something. In Dialogue with the Angel of July 7th, posted by Laura, we find this notion. The light is a gift. Love is a gift. So, if you hold back anything, for whatever reason, for whatever cause, for whatever motive, you cannot be free, totally. But nevertheless, as it is inevitable and inexorable, it is also necessary to understand, even without understanding it, so accept, thereto, that everything that happens, absolutely everything, is written. If you are depressed, it is because you had to be depressed to overcome the depression. If you have such a disease, it is because you had to have it to overcome the disease itself. Actually, it's a springboard. And it is never a punishment. I said it and said it again, it is never a reward, or a gratification, or an obstacle. That's the person who sees it that way. But seen from the absolute, everything is in its place. Nothing can go wrong. And even if you feel crooked, it is through this anomaly that you find yourself. All you have to do is release the pressure. What is pressure? What is pressure? It's been said by Grandpa in different ways. As long as you think you're holding the peanuts in the jar, you can't take your hand out of the jar. As long as you care about anything, you can't be free. I'm not talking about caring about your husband, your wife, that's part of the character. I'm really talking about the mechanisms of consciousness and spirituality. Brother, the embrace and the giving, it happens, what? Brother, the embrace and giving it is done without the movement of the person especially. I can't hear you and the microphone can't hear you either. Brother, excuse me. I say, embracing and giving does not require the movement of the person. Yes. Brother, yes, this is what we really are, who embraces and gives. It is, in any case, not a movement of the person towards, since, what we are, has always been there, we had simply forgotten it. We didn't have the ability to see him because we were too many dreamers. But once the dream was broken, at the level of the reflection of light, which was called the deviated light, the oblique light, of course, the house of cards collapsed. And it's real, it's not an image. That is to say, then of course, the ego will be terribly afraid. The self, which is spiritual pride, will not give up. But you will give up at the moment of the collective event. If you want to be free, from today on, and live this lightness and the experience so particular, this is the real moment when you accept that everything you have lived up to that moment, was only an excuse, and was only an opportunity. And that you were none of those pretexts and opportunities, but that was what you wrote yourself. That's why I said, there are no other culprits, in quotation marks, but it's not even of guilt, there's no one else in charge but you, there's only you. Entirely and totally. And it's true, it's not a view of the mind or a concept, or an idea that's there. It's an experience. But to live it, however, is to really and concretely abandon all claims, whatever they may be. Because as soon as there is a claim or claim, you are no longer true. Because you set a goal. Because you naturally put a distance. And as I say, the unknown becomes known, but you cannot search for the unknown through the known. The unknown, you let it be born, by sacrifice, by spontaneity, by the way of childhood, and it can only be revealed. If it doesn't reveal itself yet, it's, again, don't imagine a delay or an inability, or not being there. As Buddha said, when he decreed in April I decree freedom, I decree the 11 p.m. appointments, you too, in your conscious co-creation, you decree what? Sister, freedom. It's up to you to decide. Brother, the truth, yes, to live the truth. You're telling the truth. Sister, freedom. Sister, love. You decree suffering. And don't answer me that you can't get out of this disease or that mood. No, it's just that you didn't decree it. If you decree it sincerely and honestly, it is followed by immediate effect. So it is an invitation, not to reflect or ask questions, but simply to accept that if today, when I say today, it is really the time in that period, on the dream stage, the gift of grace is given to everyone with the same intensity. But the gift of grace calls us to give ourselves and not to appropriate anything. That is the principle of sacrifice, the principle of gift, the principle of service, fraternity, humility. The more, in short, you forget yourself today, the more likely you are to find yourself quickly. We forget ourselves, of course, when we see dolphins, when we listen to channeling, because there is an atmosphere that is conducive to that. But we should all be able to live the same thing without channelings, dolphins, cetaceans and people. And that's exactly how it works. So of course, we have proceeded by small touches, cetaceans too, since November, in relation to waking up. But today, you have complete freedom. And the more you feel oppressed, locked up, suffering, somewhere, it's just that you still don't fully accept your freedom. It is not a question of progress, it is not a question of ego. It's not even a matter of spiritual pride. It is a question, as Bhatti has said since April, you have not decreed the truth. You know, we've explained at length the conscious co-creation. Not to mention that everything is written, today, declare your freedom. Since you are the sovereign, even through your person, since all three are in fusion. Have you really decreed that you are the truth? Do not trust what your person tells you, what your needs, your pains, your life tell you. It's precisely because you put your life ahead of it. This normal claim of consciousness, which is not even an anomaly, is part of consciousness which is a disease, which prevents the truth from being, in its entirety. The main obstacle is not actually there, but that's what you're designing yourself right now. And despite any suffering, or gloomy mood, or disease, or disorder, there is nothing to stop you from declaring the truth. So of course, the agape resonances, the network agape resonances and the fire of the sacred heart, are a decree, but which is not imposed because I trigger, as last night, a fire of the sacred heart, but because you recognize yourself. But simply, you forget to recognize yourself in other moments. And you let your character run wild rather than remain in the decree. Of course, it causes a friction fire, a resurgence of memories, of things that seemed outdated to you, but it's only a game, it's a comedy. So don't live it as a drama. It all depends, again, on your point of view. And this point of view is not an effort. On the contrary, you notice that it is a slackening. So much so that if you are sincere, you will see more and more immediate effects, in the course of life. I am not talking about vibrations, energy or visions, or processes of experiences. I'm talking about this famous natural state. You already are. We always have been. That's the phrase, if you will, what you care about, you care about. It's so obvious. It's seen, it's like the red nose in the middle of your face. And those who are free, who see, or who take in their arms, we see it right away. There is no need for speeches, words or energy. When I say we see it, it is because the other is in us. So, if the other is really in you, beyond the essence, the smells, and everything that happened last year, if you're really the other, evidently that you know him as much as he knows himself. And you don't need his story, his emotional state, or his mental state. Recognition is not done through history, it is done through the heart. Precisely where there is no history. As Bhatti said, you're the truth, but you are also your own obstacle. It all depends on where you look, that is, the point of view or location of your consciousness. Where's your conscience? Being in the heart is not an effort. Once again, I repeat, it is a relaxation. This is the moment when you abandon any claim to acquire anything, any claim to experience anything, and you are completely available to live what is to be lived in the instant. And this instant, it is free of all information from the past, of all requests, of all projections, it is here and now. This is the present instant. And I can say that when there is suffering, of whatever nature, it does not mean that you are not love or that you are false, it simply means that you are not in the present instant. The present instant is free of any information and yet contains all the information. It is the hub of the wheel, which is stationary. If you are motionless, you see everything that happens in the character, in the world, in others, and you are not interested. There is no need to go see them. That is what I was telling you, the ability of some of my brothers and sisters to keep their consciousness effortlessly at the limit of extinction and spread consciousness. and we see all the worlds, but we stay here. Who cares about the worlds? Because he who is clinging to the truth, therefore to the absolute, cannot be fooled, neither by birth, nor by death, nor by any event. Even if in the history in which we are inscribed, in the history in which we all participate, we are obliged to note that there are facts in this dream that led to the end of history, but do not conceive, as we have all done, of seeking a precise date or seeking a precise event, because you are unavailable in relation to the present instant. The name, moreover, I am you, our last name and first name, beyond the simulacra where the Ekans thought they were buying our identity, our soul, by writing a civil status, a property deed. This is not true. It is enough, as has been said and as many have been living, to pronounce his first name and last name, which nevertheless belongs to the simulacra, something that passes but was scheduled. That was one of the key words. It's still one of the key words, by the way. Sister. And now, the Queen of England, she must be, her. Sister. Now, the Queen of England, brother. Jean, look, can you recall, what is supraconsciousness? Yes. Brother. Can you, supraconsciousness? Brother. Yes, what exactly is supraconsciousness? Supraconsciousness is the overcoming of ordinary consciousness. It is the moment when compartmentalization and fragmentation begin to disappear. It creates a feeling and experience of unity, which is real, but which, paradoxically, reinforces the self, which is also a dream. The I am, is a dream. You can't be if you're the non-being. Simply, today, there is a conjugation, or conjunction, of being, non-being and the person. If the three, in quotation marks, are aligned and in resonance, it immediately puts an end to the person and immediately ends spiritual pride or the self. You can no longer be in the I am. Not even in the I am one, as it was said at the time, for those who followed Ad. It is a state of emptiness, of total availability, but not to his little person, to his little story or to his little perceptions or vibrations. No, for the other, who is self. This is what Dialogues with the Angel said, as long as you have not given yourself, as long as you do not give, you cannot be free. Everything you keep in front of you, your story, your experiences, that doesn't mean you have to talk about them, it means you have to go through them, they don't belong to you. As long as you believe that you are your experience, even the most supramental, well, the being who best described it, before happened, was Sri Aurobindo. You see, today, what is happening with the supramental? You have lots of gurus pretending, I am the one who brings down the supramental, or I am the Divine Mother. There I don't know how many of them on earth right now. They are imposters. Because as long as you are admired, as long as you are recognized, you put yourself in a position of superiority. But he who is true is he who, in the path of the most humble childhood. If you want to live the truth, disappear from yourself, disappear from history. But it's not an effort. It's something you have to let go through, even when it comes back, but don't hang on to it. If you accept this operating principle, you make yourself available. You don't have to make an effort to accept. If you conceive that it is an effort, or if you think or experience that it is an effort, then it is the reticences and resistances, which are not embarrassing, because resistance and reticence also involve friction fire, you have no choice. Simply, you settle more easily in love than in suffering. It is still more pleasant for the character and for what is to be lived here, to be in this unspeakable, than to be in the character and in suffering, whatever it may be. Because you know very well that suffering, as has been said, leads to consciousness. You're in pain, you're carrying your conscience on it, even if you don't talk about it. Because the complaint theory, if you talk about it, it gets stronger, but you can't not think about it when you're in pain. It reminds you all the time. That makes sense. Well, precisely, in freedom, in total freedom you feel pain but you do not suffer. That is, your consciousness is not deviated. And you can see that. So, let go of any claim to want to be this or that because wanting or claiming puts distance and prevents recognition. Remembering who you are, beyond being, is never an effort and is never anywhere but in the present instant. And embrace, acceptance, can only happen in the present instant. This is the moment, for different reasons, suffering, an event, when you really and concretely say, I don't care. Anything can happen to me, it doesn't matter. That doesn't mean you're going to flog yourself, or make yourself suffer or anything. On the contrary, it is the moment when you relax your consciousness. This is the moment when you precisely grasp that by living it, you are not consciousness. Freedom is in the disappearance of consciousness. It is not in the supraconsciousness. Superconsciousness takes you into the dream, takes you to visions, takes you to the sometimes very subtle claim of the ego, to believe oneself someone, to believe oneself something, to believe oneself a being of light. It is part of the development stage, in quotation marks, but it represents an obstacle to the truth today. Superconsciousness, of course, is the living experience, not of energy but of vibration. The supraconsciousness has different markers that are the activation of crowns, crown of the head, crown of the heart, activation of the life wave, Marian channel, activation of gates and stars. That's the supraconscious. But again, all aspects of consciousness can be classified into something that is just passing through. We're anterior to consciousness. True happiness, which does not depend on circumstances, of course is induced by naked joy, by great silence, by vibrations, as long as you also let go of that. At some point, the real sacrifice is, to make the very sacrifice of the naked consciousness, the consciousness of eternity, the body of eternity. That doesn't mean you're neglecting him, he's here. But you stop putting distance. As soon as you understand that it is a matter of distance and point of view, there is no need to think about energies, vibrations, thoughts, emotions. Quite naturally, they are definitely moving away from you. So it is acceptance, it is relaxation of consciousness. It's also a relief. Because you can only see, as I said earlier, the difference between the state where you were a person or the state where you were by these vibrations and superconsciousness and the moment when you are no longer subjected to consciousness or the body. It is the moment when there is no longer any impulse, sexual or otherwise. All the impulsive mechanisms, all the mechanisms of conditioned reflexes, are only linked to the persistence of the ego. Or the idea, if you prefer, without any notion of deterioration, to believe yourself a person or to believe yourself a conscience or an entity. You don't have to wear all the clothes and stories. Or to relive all the stories and all the entities and all the energies and all the vibrations. All you have to do is accept, but without seeking acceptance. It is a neurochemical process that releases, as I said, oxytocin and makes you live this unspeakable love. Even the qualifiers that we use have less and less meaning because it is a habit, it has been a setting. This is what places you in the truth of the instant and in the availability of the instant, not for you, not for your comfort, not for your little life, but in totality for the other. That's the real service. It is to allow the other to recognize himself by providing him with the information of zero time without any will. A gape resonance and a gape resonance network, I remind you, there is still an intention, there is still an appointment, but it leads to the fire of the Sacred Heart, what you lived last night and which can only reappear whatever you are doing. You have been delivered by information and good news. It was a state that may have passed this morning, that you no longer feel, but it can only come back. And you will only be able to see even if there is no permanence of the fire of the Sacred Heart, this kind of relaxation in relation to personal claims, or even to vibrations or visions, if you accept. Acceptance, I can't give it to you, no one can give it to you. But opening the heart, yes, today what we were saying, no one can open someone else's heart, that is so wrong. Today, that's not true. If we are really in each other, if you open your heart, the heart of the other is also yours. It's you too. At that point, there is no longer a barrier. And I see well, and you have felt it for those who have already asked me for a gape resonance and other, the power that was generated yesterday. So I didn't emit any energy or vibration. I simply read your name, without asking for anything, without mobilizing any energy or vibration. I had put myself in the posture of a gape resonance, nor did I say anything or ask for anything or even the idea of welcoming you into me, since you are me. It's just that I have to think of your name, your first name. I don't need to visualize anything, you all felt the fire of your heart, and all at the same time. Before, there was a progression, I said, you wait 10:05, 10:10, the time it takes. No, it was instantaneous. Instantly, instantly, instantly. And it's not an effort, it's not a will. It's not even an alignment. It is that the fact of pronouncing your last name and first name puts you in the truth. But I didn't do anything. I didn't even have to trigger the breathing of the heart or the double terrace or go out or embrace you. It's done without me. And even more simple, sister, without us too, for that matter. Sister, it is done without us too. Yes, of course. There is even simpler, you do not need, it is enough that your spontaneity is real, your simplicity is real, everything you will look at, everything you will hear, everything you will meet, will be transformed. Once again, I said it for all the meetings, well, of course, it's nice to have citations, channelings or the different things we do, but once again, it's just a pretext to make you available. Of course, once you carry the good news, even if you are not yet living at the level of your being or person, you are not only contaminated, but you contaminate everyone else, from one person to another and from one place to another. But I assure you, last night, at no time did any energy or vibration or consciousness mobilize. It was simply, you were, in quotation marks, in reception, you were simply immobile in bed with your hands like that, on either side of your heart. And just saying your name is enough. I explained it to you for noon there, which he does at 11 p.m, I don't even lie down anymore, nor do I receive, it does itself. It's done through me and without me. Sister, do you feel noon at 11 o'clock? What? How? Sister, yes, at 11 p.m, do you feel body? Oh, yes, of course. Yesterday, we even felt it a little before, 6 minutes before. Yes, yes, yes. Even if I feel it or don't carry my conscience on it, it's there anyway. I don't even have to deal with it. So at the beginning, it's interesting, of course, to feel because you have the impression that you are participating and that you are feeling. But remember that perception itself can and is an obstacle to truth. Perception is only an interface between the inside and the outside. A consciousness cannot be perception or felt. This does not mean that there are no more feelings, quite the contrary, they are all there. But again, it is not your consciousness that is driven by a vision, by feeling. It proves that you are no longer in consciousness. Because the specificity of consciousness is to maintain history, to maintain form, to maintain individuality, the myth of individuality, and that, to go to the source of consciousness, is simply to rediscover the truth. All the means we have given, the humility, simplicity, all the concepts, teachings, and vibrations we have all lived through, were only to prepare us for this moment. The only obstacle is us. It's not even the other one, it's not the circumstances of your life. Yes. Sister. So, in the evening, when we go to say the last names and first names of those we want to say, yes. Sister. Is it better to do this? Yes. You put the body in resonance. Sister, we are no longer obliged to do a gape. Yes, it is. I didn't say that. A gape resonance network allows to spread the good news, but when you live the fire of the Sacred Heart, I simply say that you no longer need to put yourself in posture or to put yourself motionless. Sister, okay. Yesterday, I could have made you sit down. So it's more pleasant to lie down. And as I said, and as each brother who lives it, can say it in the same way with the same intensity, you just have to think of my last name or the last name of another who is liberated to be free. There is no energy transfer, there is no movement. You place yourself instantly in zero time like that. This is what we call in chemistry, the catalyst. That is, the chemical reaction does not take place, the presence of the catalyst allows the chemical reaction to take place, but the catalyst has done nothing. He didn't participate in the chemical reaction, but he must be here. The pitfall would be to consider through this that you are superior to anything or anyone else. The teaching on humility, by Master Philippe Divine for those who followed out at the time, is crucial in this respect. That's what's real. and you can only notice that there is no longer any disease and that you are permanently in this serenity, in this happiness. Sister, so what moves me a little bit if you want is that, immediately comes to me with great acuity when something is wrong, sounds wrong, you see in a brother or sister, what do you see with great acuity? Sister, when something sounds wrong, when something is moved. And so it pushes me back a little, you know. I'm having trouble getting to that. Retain what? Sister, when I feel that there is something false emanating from it being, that's the point. You can feel it very well. Sister, see, it freezes me a little. I'm having trouble getting past this. Yes. Yes. It just means that somewhere you think the game has to be perfect. However, it is precisely the imperfection of the game, the ekans, those who are in pride, who must be loved. Sister, oh no, I'm not saying I don't like them. Yes. Yes, yes. Sister, I remain from heart to heart, but I have difficulty reaching them. It's like something's repressing me a little bit, you know. There are times when it is better to love from afar, as they say, than to love closely. There's no point today in going to waste your time with dreamers, for example. That's why I cut off all communication with many of the brothers and sisters who were keeping the dream alive. It's not that I don't like them or that I say they're wrong. I'm just saying, they're in a dream, I don't want to dream that. That's all. That's all. But it's not a rejection. On the contrary, it is divine indifference that allows them to let their game evolve in you, without participating in it. That's all. That's all. But it can't be a rejection. On the other hand, however, there may be a certain form of reluctance or retraction in proximity, even because they feed something that is contrary to the truth. So, it is not a rejection but an energetic or vibratory reflex that is quite logical. When you don't find an echo in your heart in the other, you can only love it. But yes, there is no echo in the other. Sister, you are suffering. Do not throw pearls at swine, said Christ. Yes, it's the truth. It doesn't mean not loving them or rejecting them. It means letting them go, as Barbara said. If you can't love, go your way, don't get into conflict. See? See? It does not mean neglecting them, it does not mean rejecting them, but on the contrary, leaving them free of their own illusions. That's how you love them the most. That's why we're always told, let dreamers dream. When they get tired of dreaming, when they have suffered and resisted enough, they will evidently find what they are. But indeed, the risk, as you say, moreover the body feels it, the energy feels it, that if you continue to nourish their dream, you strengthen them in their dream. So, since you can't oppose yourself, because if you oppose yourself, you enter into duality, what's left? That, as Barbara said, go your way or leave them to their dream. It doesn't matter. Sister, as I walked along his path, I thought to myself, I put some distance between myself and there it was. Rather than distance, I prefer the term indifference. This indifference of consciousness, energy and vibration, they can very well lie next to you, it can be your husband, even your wife. Sister, you don't care, that's it, there you go. Indifference also creates relaxation. It is not an indifference, no, it is better to be indifferent than to discuss, than to negotiate with dreamers. Sister, because it never ends. They are impermeable to the truth. Sister, and even if we tell them, think what you want, it doesn't bother me, no, because now you're gonna get a kick out of it. Sister, let me also think as I live, but this is unbearable. It becomes a systematic attack. You know very well that if you are woken up in the middle of the night for no reason, you will not be happy. Laughs. It is the same for them. Brother, yes. Besides, they didn't actually ask for anything. They didn't ask you for anything. Sister, and besides, they want you to continue, there you go. And it is they who come to harass you, of course, to bring you back on the path of your dreams. Voice. That's it. Laughs. Sister, and it's really on tiptoe, backwards so as not to push too fast, oh yes, yes. There is nothing to condemn, there is nothing to judge, and you can only say that like Christ. Father, forgive them, they do not know that they are doing. They really don't know what they are doing. Sister, it is a word, what had come to me without knowing that it was pronounced like that, and you can see today that they are the most virulent at all levels. On the energy side, they throw incredible things. They are in the permanent justification rather than in the gift. When you are really in the gift, you don't need anything else but to give yourself, no story, no scenario, no energy, no vibration. You give yourself away, period. They maintained the dream by being convinced that they were the supra-consciousness. This is in line with what Grandpa Omraham said in 2016, when there were a lot of people who deviated a little, simply because there is another word for it, an expression that I like very much. Well, I'll say it in SATSANG, well, they want to be Caliph instead of Caliph. It's as simple as that. The problem is that they did not understand that this Caliph, he is not a Caliph. I have never been in a position of power or authority, never, never. Sister, but already, determined, I am this or that. I think it is interesting when you're all mixed up, I would say, in this area, and that's what's wonderful about it. Sister, but then it becomes too much too, because it is a position on what is involved. Alright, let's make up our minds, that's it, I'm not it. But after a while, it's useless because it's stuck to the final creation. Of course. Sister, and, you have to turn around somewhere to be able to free yourself and leave the creation behind, while not refusing it, and while, the best service to do them is to love them. But you don't have to communicate. Especially since communication there will never be a communion because we feel it, it retracts us, there is no judgment. So, not judging sometimes requires, as you say, a certain form of distance that is not an on-love, but a real refusal of communication or relationship, because the relationship, in this case, as we see very quickly now, is diverted towards manifestation and dream. And above all, there is a deep malaise and a deep deficit of self-love. So, it's a disguise where they're forced to use decorum, which I've called the nose in the middle of the face. So, once again, wait. Sister, it is also true that they live with some members of our family. Completely. Sister, they are not at all, supposedly, in spirituality, completely. And mixed in silence. But don't try to convince them, you will make them return even more in resistance, you will not do them any favors. Sister, yes, but sometimes it inhabits us, there you go. You love them but you cut off the personal, relational and communication aspect, loving them in silence. That's all you can do, by the way. Sister, and it is done alone in the heart as long as we ourselves have things to go through in relation to what has remained, nothing. Sister, it's important to still be in the relationship, because it has to be friction and it has to cross and then all of a sudden it comes from there and well, now it's over and we're brought, yes. You do them a favor and at the same time you do yourself a favor. In order not to be trained. Sister, that's right. By the person, by the residual elements of the person, who is there until the end, or by abracadabra stories that go on and on. Where we must constantly justify, then, we all know that in our families, where our deeds and gestures must be justified from the other's point of view. That's it. Sister. And then, I had to really cut my ties for 3.5 years, well, it was imposed on me anyway, and I created a little feedback because I thought I was good, because I had heard things, although they didn't get in touch with me. It didn't seem to have changed much between us at last. And it was only 1.5 years later that little by little, I gradually, even when I came back, I went and when it started to spin all that, it didn't touch me anymore, in fact, I gave up. I went away, what I said was said, it is the way of wisdom. Sister, and I left, I had big repressions, I left. And then 2 weeks later, it was forgotten, it was penetrated a little more. And at some point, with my eldest son it caused something. And then he could talk, you see, he could, at least about his relationship with me, say. But Mom, by the way, we always loved you despite everything we put you through, it was there but good. They didn't own themselves, if you will, because, you have all noticed also, even in your own families, with your children, with your parents, that when you are in this natural agape state, it bothers them enormously. They don't know why, because they don't necessarily feel things or see them. But you annoy them, really and concretely, yet you have done nothing. It can be very violent. Oh yes, 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 absolutely. So, in these cases, what solution do you have? It's not to impose your presence on them anymore. I don't even talk about words and speeches. Sister, they were the ones who came to squat. I moved. In 6 years, I had to move 5 times. Every time, I would leave the apartment, the furniture, everything beautiful. You're here, you're fine, that's cool. There are certain moments when it is better to lose everything to find yourself. You can't compromise on the love you're experiencing. If there are circumstances that occur, if there is an intolerable feeling, when you live the fire of your heart and everything, you are forced to let go there too. You can't convince anyone. And by the way, once again, the best service you can provide them is to put distance in quotation marks. To no longer communicate, that is, in real communication, there is always a transmitter and a receiver. To no longer enter into a relationship, because the relationship involves a transaction between one entity and another entity, but to love them. But to love in silence, to let them dream, is a proof of love. And when someone no longer finds any opposition force, then these are people who always like to be in confrontation and opposition, they never agree. Sister, so they were not born that way. Because I had my eldest until I was 8 years old and raised him alone. In fact, the father was seen very, very little. And there was really a communion, there was a facility in everything, you know. Whether it was sport or studies, nothing posed a communication problem. And when his father came to settle down, he really put rules in place, whereas I was very flexible. There were requests, but here he agreed to make it easier, to clean his room. I adapted everything so that it would be, evidently. That's what I'm saying, strengthening communion as we do in encounters between people who have either the same lived experience or the same aspiration, even if it's still a distance, it's not a big deal, because we all have, at least today. Now we see it clearly. It's no longer like before with that, where there were brothers and sisters who were there to confront and oppose each other. There, they can no longer hold out in meetings. It started when we went to Morocco. You saw the couple who ran away in the middle of the day. Because they were not able to stand what was going on. Of course, agape is intolerable for the ego. It is intolerable for spiritual pride. Sister, I can tell you that it makes them very violent. And you're here, because you think to yourself, but he didn't understand. You absolutely have to intertwine conversation. Well, when you've tested it once or twice, when you've spent enough energy to try to prove the truth of what you're going through, in the end you let go. What? You are not going to spend your life justifying who you are to anyone, husband, wife, child, parent. You are, period. What? Sister, when we call them, for example, they will move back. Yes, of course. You can call them all you want, but you don't have to tell them, especially not. Because if you tell them you're going to call them, they're going to resist. They are the ones. You are. You. Moreover, but it is not serious, their strength of resistance and opposition serves the light. As the Edens and as the planes of the shadow, which has been written, only serve the light, they simply did not know it. Sister, so I realized this perfectly, because despite all the effort I was making to unify things, because I really had an idea, I wanted to become something harmonious. I had the ability, and then, wait, you were saying what? Because then I lost my idea? Voice. I simply said that, just call them, sister. Yes, yes. And no, what you were saying is that yes, and at the same time, it made it possible because I wasn't going into the confrontation, if you will. I was trying to bring something extra by saying to bridge this and that. Yes, but you think that, but maybe we can also improve this together, because we're all, sister. And so he put himself forward. He was saying, no, but anyway I'm the brains behind it. Yes, yes. We've all been through this under different circumstances. Sister. elaborate on this, and so it brings out a lot of elements from which I wondered where he got them, since in his linear life, it was not at all in conformity with what, but you have to experience it effectively. As you say, when you have experienced it once, twice, or even 10 times if necessary, when you get tired of feeling bad, because you were trying to justify yourself to the family, or to other brothers and sisters, you no longer give food, you refuse confrontation, and then you disempower them. Sister. So, what is going on there? I was stuck, locked up, that is to say with blackmail to the children, brought to Morocco. Well, there were problems of justice, so we had to leave there, and a few months later, I said, well, listen, I have my plane ticket, I leave, I come back to get the children. Because you see, it's not possible for us to get along. So, as much, here it is, stop the case. And he said to me, no, don't think you're going to leave. And at that moment he said to me, if you leave, you don't see the children anymore. I take them to the village, and so I had to regress and wait for it to be possible. The best service you can do for them is to let them dream. It's a proof of love. But do not enter into confrontation, because you're already seeing that even in your families, other brothers and sisters, they try to titillate you to take you into reaction, into confrontation. Sister. I have held. I was completely exhausted. He knew very well where to touch, and it will eventually touch you, if you listen to them. Of course. So, indeed, as Baba said, go on your way, let them dream. Yes, sister. But we also find the opposite, that is, even among those who are in consciousness and in ordinary life, and that the yes, and for that, well, even when they notice that there is a difference, and that they are not disturbed. First, they look at us, they call us, she's weird anyway, she's a little strange. And it is nevertheless welcomed, but what I experience then is this dance of love between worlds, finally, between different realities, and that there is a way that it can be harmonious, even if so, well, yes, there is due to duality, it is yes to this world, and that, well, at least it is something else that is there. But it still dances love. So there is no separation. It is more likely to harmonize with people who believe nothing, who think nothing, who see nothing, than with all those who nurture visions in the future. It's much easier indeed, with someone who lives nothing. At first he's surprised, amazed. And after a while, he sees that in the end, it doesn't change the relationship, on the contrary. Sister. And that on the contrary, what I was told is that, it just recently happened. I was with friends who left for a weekend, and I'm creepy when I'm spontaneous, and then like that, and then at the end, the friend, she takes me in her arms, she tells me, especially you don't change, you're fine as you are. Laughs. Because fire, the paradox is that, when you are natural, even if the other is amazed, provided that there are no beliefs or frames of reference too rigid, even if he lives nothing, he will accept you. Sister. Yes. It even sings, yes. Which is not the case with dreamers. Dreamers are a nightmare, I would say. And it will become more and more so. There's nothing we can do about it. Brother. I would like to give a testimony, yes. Brother. That I recently did during a plane trip. And so, we take our seats, I was already sitting in my seat. Then in the corridors, there is a man talking, and then behind him, there is a woman calling out to the man who was in front of him and saying, but anyway, it's not even worth touching me, I don't see why you're doing this, what? Then she actually stands behind me. And the gentleman she finally called out to, finally he sits next to me, and I say, but, don't worry anyway, life is a great theatre scene, laughs. And then, when I addressed the sister in the back, I told her, listen to my sister, agape, I love you, what, there's nothing to worry about. Laughs, but I spit out everything, you see, I was 108.55, and the guy laughed, but he said, yes, it's a big theatre scene, but the chick behind it, we didn't hear her anymore, what? It was over, Laughs. In any way, it's very bad. Tangled discussion. Brother. And I told her, I love you, my sister, I love you. There's no problem, I love you. And it was over, You have brothers, sisters, the common men or the cream of the spirituous, it's the same thing. These are people who are suffering, of course, quite evidently, of course. So, they feed on confrontation, opposition and suffering. Now, the one who really lives the heart, simplicity, humility without even mentioning agape, he is in his natural state. And that for them is intolerable. So, of course, when it is the family that lives nothing, well, after being stunned or disturbed, they accept you. So obviously, when it's the family that lives nothing, well, after being stunned or disturbed, they accept you. But the one who is in the dream of consciousness cannot accept you, he can only react and confront you more and more. And if you play his game, if you play his dream, you're going to be destroyed. Sister, that's it, it destroys. Yes. Sister, it's just a small testimony about that. We went away on the weekend with 2 friends, one of whom was very calm, totally welcoming everything that was, etc. And then a third one which was, yes, but I made food, you don't eat and I asked you if you were. We hadn't said anything at all, so we went to the reception, the embrace, and it ended, we'll say, not too well at the end of the weekend. And, there had been a big confrontation with 2 people who put themselves in retreat, and one who exploded. Well, it was actually when I discovered where, first name, had shared me agape, put my hands, etc. And I placed myself in the heart really, the week that followed, etc. I put this situation in the heart, really here, and at some point, because I didn't know how to do it, I say to myself, but I was also a little bit in resistance, thinking to myself, oh, I wish it had gone well and that it hadn't gone well, etc. I didn't know, I thought to myself. Then I offer it to the heart, and then I'll see what happens. And what I really felt, well, there's no feeling, but I just stood there, and all of a sudden, it melted like, it melted like it fell into my heart, let's say, and I felt totally at peace with it. Finally there was nothing at all happening. And as if by chance, the friend in question contacted me again, saying, well, could we see each other, could we see this or that, but I had no expectations, and then I said, but you know, anyway, she didn't ask me any questions, but she said, what do you think, I wonder if we're going to see each other again, because eventually we'd have to. I said to myself, oh, it was complicated again. Then I told her, but do you really want to see me? What? Ask yourself the question, do you really want to see me again? And if you want to see me, well, be simple, we'll see each other. You want to meet where? So then she burst out laughing. Well, she said, oh, I love you. Okay, I understood that she told me, it's okay, that's it. And then, it was solved. And we didn't even see each other, but I mean, the simple fact of having given it back to the heart by saying to myself, well, it's going to be solved, I don't know how, well, poof, it was done. I don't know how to explain, it was, I didn't ask myself with my head how I should do it, I just placed it in my heart, well, without. The more you are in this silence in relation to a reactive oppositional mode, as they say, to take distance, well, it is not a real distance, you put them in your heart in silence, there, and, above all, you let them free. Sister, I didn't want anything at all from this story. The greatest service, in quotation marks, that you can do to someone in these cases, whether it is family, friends, or anything else, is to leave them free. Because if you let them free, even without communicating, even without entering into a relationship, you allow them to wake up to, no matter what they say. On the other hand, if you enter into confrontation, opposition, or relationship, you will necessarily lose, that is, predation will occur. Remember? Well, you don't remember, but when I showed the clean photos in Morocco, between 2 individuals, there are what are classically called chemistry. You've all heard that expression. But it is a reality. When you have a doctor with a patient, when you have a couple, when you have a mother with her child, when you have 2 individuals, even friends, who know each other, who don't know each other too well, or 2 very close friends for a long time, you just take a clean picture of both indexes, and you observe what happens to the radiation. So, well, we didn't have time there in 3 days to show it to you, but it was very clear. You have the predator, it's the one who has the chemistry, it's the one who comes to take your radiance, and it really shows, and you're in control, whether it's a couple, a doctor, a friendly relationship, it's the same thing. He has taken the ascendancy on you, and feeds on you. Predation is constant in the relationship, the balance never exists. Everyone talks at the same time. The couples who were doing the best, paradoxically, were the ones who were, that is, when their indexes, their rays, were put in, there was like a barrier between the two, there were no chemistry, but they were. You put their fingers on, they each had their own radiance, there was an emptiness between the two, so there was no energy communication, but when we interviewed them, however, it was people who were a relationship. Whether couple, child, parent, where there was never any problem. It is passion that creates the problem, it is predation that creates the problem, it is the state of love, which is not love, that drives the impulse. And then you had couples, so now they were worse. And then you had couples, so there, they were worse, that is, the rays weren't even towards each other, there were no chemistry, where there was no predator and the other was not preyed on, the rays were fleeing, that is, they were leaving at the tips of both fingers to escape each other. Well, these were a relationship where there was no problem. It was not love, it was tolerance, they tolerated each other. But any relationship where there is a teacher and a learner, any relationship where there is a knowing or knowing person who imposes on you, even by writing a prescription, a treatment, is a predation. Like it or not, neuroscience of today shows us that the Klein effect already showed it at the time. When you see these images, you can't forget them. And any relationship involving two individuals, the same mother-child, the same couple where harmony is perfect, is a relationship of predation. It is human nature, you can do nothing about it. In a gape, there is no relationship, there is resonance, it is not the same thing. Resonance is recognition. When there is recognition, there can be no relationship, since the relationship is a transaction and involves an entity, another entity, a transmitter and receiver, or a predator and someone who is preyed upon. In resonance, when you hug each other, there can be no predation. There is a recognition, it's not the same thing at all. Sister, and you don't have the same relationship with all your children, don't we have the same? Sister, we don't have the same relationship with all his children, I have 3 of them, they are very in predation with me, and the last one, I was told after that he had come from another part, with whom it never happened. He's the one who finally came to help me. As soon as you take over someone, even in a normal role, as a father or mother in relation to education, you're in predation, it's as simple as that, everything works by predation in this world. I eat you, that's why Christ said, the one who wins is not the one who eats, it's the one who is eaten, because he delivers his information, by being eaten to the other. The smallest is the winner. But this is not true for those who think the opposite, who are masters, who are teachers of this or that. We see it well, whether in religions or even, we will say, in the medical field. I know, when you go up the ladder, for example, you're an intern, a clinic manager and you are given an aggregation, and you are a professor, there is no one who escapes that. The most characteristic level are the great medical pundits who receive you on a desk, on a platform, their seats higher than you, and you are down there. That's a classic one. Laughs. Sister. Oh, but that's the lawyers, they're all still, exactly, where the judge, who puts himself in height. The lawyer, he's at the same level as you, the judge he's up there, the prosecutor he's up there. Sister. The highest seat, that's it, with proper clothing, of course. It's just representation and it's just predation. As long as there is this slightest aspect in your behavior, that is, to take it from above, or from someone who thinks he is superior, because he has experienced this or that thing, or because he has that knowledge, it's over. There can't be any resonance, there's a relationship. And the relationship, a transaction, is always between adults and children, for example, and the medical professor or the professor, the judge who is on his chair, he is in a position of authority, because he has a role to play, but the problem is that these people identify with their roles. They are losing their humanity. The more you get into the expertise, the more you get into the technicality of a profession, the more you verify it, because I have worked a lot in my neuroscience and models and systems that I have created on the company. As soon as you give a person a role of authority, even a department head, a sales manager, for example, who has 4 salesmen under his control, he exercises a predation. Sister. In the studies of sociology, social psychology, for example, it is well determined that a worker who passes as a foreman becomes worse than the director himself. He will be even more observant, more severe, because he will want to justify the fact of having this promotion. He becomes the enemy of his friend of yesterday, and it is done without. As soon as you give power to someone in a position or role, they take that power for themselves and they are done. Sister. Yes, that's right, and that's it, and so are the others. Yes, and he is convinced that he is superior, even if he does not admit it. Since I have authority as head of department, dear staff, or head of this or that, well, we think of ourselves as superior beings. Sister. And besides, we will have even more value because, even in market value, yes, they get paid more. Sister. They are paid more, which brings them closer to the boss. And that's how it works at all levels of society. We have submitted to what is called the societal order, the hierarchy, whatever it may be. We are supposed to obey orders or laws, and that is it. It is men who created it. Sister. When you see how laws are passed, I have seen laws that, if we take the pack leader from other mammals, it has a name. It is called the Lucifer principle, which is active in humans. There is the one who eats first, fucks first, and has the position of authority. It is the pack leader. The only problem is that humans have diverted that to their advantage. More money, more power, more ancestry. Whereas when we talk about a pack leader, for example in wolves, no, it is the one who really watches over the herd. Sister. He is behind, by the way. Sister. He's educating now. That's it, and he's alone. There is no belt of communication. It does not delegate power to a hierarchical order with the adjutant, brigadier, commander, etc., 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 and the general, etc. This whole game of society is a game of predation. It's the Luciferic principle, and it's the principle of mammals, and we are mammals. We can't do anything about it. Sister. Just breathing is a predation, because you breathe gases. We don't breathe anything, eating, doing it, but there, with the Klein effect, it was very clear. It gave funny situations. We went very far for example, with the Klein effect, I showed you, those who were there in April, the only time you are in balance, where the energy balance is perfect, is when you are dead. Laughs. Sister. Oh, great. We went to the morgues. Yes, we did. We had Klein effects on the dead. We went to the morgues to photograph them. For example, people where we saw that they were going to die, because they had a massive heart attack. We had a Klein effect. We obviously saw the heart attack on the Klein effect, and oh stupor, as soon as they died, the energy radiation was perfect. So the material is perfect. When I tell you to release the pressure on your body, you are not that body. Leave your body alone. Besides, when you die, you are forced to leave it alone. This body. He's dead. You are dead. Sister. What do you mean, to leave this body alone? Leaving your body alone is leaving it for what it is. It is a marvel of mechanics. Whether we call it a temple or a bag of meat, it comes down to the same thing. But you are not that body. That is, when you leave your body in its natural state, that is, without causing any reaction between the body-mind, emotional or other connection, you can only notice that the one who is free, released in quotation marks, his body works perfectly well. Totally fine. There is no reason for him to express any disagreement, if you leave him alone. And I see it every day, whether in relation to the changes experienced in my form, in this co-ownership, in the disappearance of diseases, in the optimal functioning of this body, despite the advancing age. Because if you leave him alone and give him what is good for him in terms of food, he will give him back 100-fold. He will no longer disturb you. That's what we have with the ketogenic diet we talked about. That's what we see when you let your body go free. When we are taught that it is necessary, at school or in physiology, when you are told that you must eat 3 meals a day, it is a monumental bullshit. Your body knows when it is hungry, and just because it is time to eat doesn't mean it will necessarily be hungry. So if you bend, well, when we meet, we have to eat at such and such a time since we are together, but in my normal life, I only eat when this body is hungry. But I can also combine my pleasure with it. Eat 7 couscous in a week, and I won't gain any grams, any weight. But overall, let your body life, leave it alone, maintain it with what it asks you, move, dance, sing, play music, swing, feel the need, but don't impose rules on it. Sister. So if you have a leader in front of you, if you have someone who is always in, a person, the family or like that, you don't answer, it's better not to. Sister. That's it. But if you face that in your life today, it's because it was the best challenge for you. I don't work, I don't have a challenge, I don't have a leader, a god, or a master. And I could not, fundamentally, today, put myself under the authority of anyone. It is impossible to envisage, to imagine or even to conceive. Life, so already with the cessation of AT, the cessation of AT in 2012, the cessation of medicine in 2006, all this showed me that, for example, I did 30 years of medicine in something that fascinated me, but I was in an incredible state of stress, and that I did not feel. It was only when I stopped taking medicine, when I stopped working, that I noticed the relaxation and things that I had accepted as normal, which were not normal. When I say, leave your body, leave it alone, yes, he knows what is good for him, much more than you do. But if you force him by saying I have to go to bed at 8 o'clock, because it's good for my health, or I have to eat at such and such an hour without it I'll have hypoglycemia, it's over. You enslave yourself to rules that have no place in it. The body is a wonder, it works on its own without you. It is as soon as you get involved in it, that it gets sick. A madman never has a degenerative disease. If you are sensitive, you are quite capable of recognizing, even before you have a disease or disorder, the slightest imbalance. It doesn't mean you're obsessed with your body, no, it just tells you that, and if you force it, well, you're going to get sick. If, on the other hand, you accept what he tells you, what has been called the response of the heart, as OMA had mentioned, you do not even need to start the response of the heart, to feel the agreement or disagreement, you follow what is called, what I called yesterday I think, the evidence and fluidity, what we call the maximum neurobiological efficiency. It's not the same for the athlete in what I explained to you yesterday, but it's the same for you in the way this body works. Be gentle with him, he's your vehicle, respect his requests, but don't be fooled. If you impose rules on him, supposedly because it's easier and it creates harmony, you'll see that it will only trigger disharmony. As soon as you impose yourself on this body, to tell you, I eat at this time, I go to bed at this time, you are not free, how can you be free in there? Since you yourselves set rules, you set limits for it. If you leave your body free, it will return it to you 100-fold and you can only witness the miracle. Sister. It may be a little more difficult for people who work, oh, of course. Sister. And who have schedules, so that's it. Sister. It depends, because you see, because if I have to wake up at 4 in the morning, I'm not used to it. I tell myself before, wake me up at 4 in the morning, at 4 in the morning, at 4 in the morning, I am awake, 4 minus 10 in the morning I am awake. Sister. No, but I'm not talking about waking up, I'm talking about eating. Sister. Eating. But you give your body habits, sister. It's a little more difficult. Yes, it's like that when you meet someone, there's a meal that's served at that time, you eat at that time. But it doesn't last long. But my body is much better when I eat when it has decided, or when I have decided to indulge myself by eating I don't know what, but the body will take it without any problem. Sister. Yes, because it happens to me sometimes I remember it at 2 o'clock p.m., but if I get hungry at 5 o'clock a.m., I do something again at 5 o'clock a.m., and then it can go on until the next morning. The more you accept the freedom of your body, the more it will give it back to you 100-fold, and it's not a question of age. Once again I am the illustration. I've never been so flexible in my life, I've never been so in shape in my life. However, it is not the age when you're in the best shape. Usually it is more likely to be in your 20s, 30s or 40s and 50s, but not at the age of 60. So, if you want, I can see these effects. They are constant in me and in all the brothers and sisters who accept them. Laughs. What's the matter? What's the matter? Laughs. Sister. Naughty. Other sister. What makes her laugh? Other sister. She said to, first name. But he's your age. Then she said, but I am not 60 years old. In any case, in short, accept that you can do nothing about nothing, since all that is to be is, and all that is not to be is not. Sister. That's it. Accept this as a rule of conduct and you will see that your life will be surprisingly easy, at all levels. Because, at that moment, it is also a form of gift. You have given yourself, you no longer control, you no longer master, but you are in the evidence and the facility, and you see it every day. Every day it is something beautiful, because you have total freedom, to eat when you want, to sleep when you want, or when your body asks for it, but you do not impose anything on it. So we're talking about work. Of course it's more difficult at work, but I remind you that work makes you free, what they said, but work, the etymology of the word work, or earning a living, you don't have to earn a living, it's there. To see even these expressions that we use, they are delusional, they are linked to society, they are not linked to who you are, because, sister, I do have rent, I have to pay some things, you do, I don't. Well, yes, no. I don't take care of anything. Sister, you still need a minimum income. Remember that the word work, etymologically, means torture. Sisters, yes, really? That's clear, we don't want to. Laughs. Then it's a personal story. How you combine and marry societal obligations, as you say, and freedom. It's up to you to decide if you feel free in there. But don't emphasize the fact that it's mandatory to pay rent or taxes. If you don't win anything, you don't have to pay anything. Discussions. Yes, but, if you have nothing, you have nothing to pay, that's for sure, so I sleep under the bridge. No, that's what you think. If you have total trust in love and in life, you will never sleep under a bridge, even if you do not have money. It was society that forced you to think like that, it was society's organization that locked you up. Does an aboriginal person, does a dolphin make a living? Sister, is that, excuse me? Does a dolphin make a living? A dolphin, he lives in the water, but he lives on the same land as you, he is much smarter than you, he has a brain, in addition. Does he care whether he will earn a living, or what he will eat tomorrow? The words of Christ. Who has this level of consciousness today? Societal confinement is the worst of all prisons. It was sold to us as an advantage, insurance, social insurance, life insurance, security. We see where security is leading today, to the total confinement of consciousness, much more than the confinement of econs. Societal confinement is a much greater burden today than what the econs achieved 300,000 years ago. Well, that's the direct consequence. But a dolphin, it is free, cetaceans are free, even from their bodies, they can lose their bodies, they do not suffer. Brother, they are not administered, that's it. They are not limited by a societal framework, even if they live in groups and in society, they are free. Work does not make you free, work enslaves you. From the moment money appeared, as Mary already said in the very first channeling, long before she had mentioned this notion of money very widely. As soon as you put an interest on the money, you are cooked, because you get into hoarding, you get into greed, and society is built on it. You work for a boss. Sister, there is a hierarchy. First of all, it doesn't seem like it to you, moreover, First Name had said it, when he made his business schools, capitalism is the enslavement of man by man. Period. This is the official definition of business schools. The one who earns the most is the one who enslaves the most people, and he loses his freedom. A dolphin does not ask itself what it will buy. He lives. Society prevents you from living, whether you like it or not, it brings you security, but this security is an illusion, it deprives you of freedom, and the safer you are, the less free you are, the safer you are, the less available you are for the truth. Sister, and the sicker you get. Sister, I think to myself that if you don't work, we don't have any money. Sister, it's not going to come to me either, that is, I'm not going to move, I'm going to stay, I wouldn't have anything, but this quest is endless. Yes, you'll get nothing. Sister, but that's a belief. But if you are love, there are all the others who are there for you. Lively discussion. Brother, I have nothing, I don't work, well, that's it. Sister, yes, I know, there are many who don't work here. Brother, I'm here, I'm enjoying it. Sister, it happens. I lived alone, alone, very young, well it's true I ate at night, I was a student, it was rusks and then a chocolate, you know. But it didn't seem like it was missing something. On weekends I would go to my sister's house, I would make a real meal and then I would be fine. And I was never sick. And then I didn't want to do otherwise. Anyway, I didn't have a fridge, it's very simple. When you have tasted the laziness of not working, you can only become more and more lazy. But I worked 80 hours a week. 80 hours a week, when I was a doctor, yes. Sister, but I work part-time, so I am not already. Sister, I like to do nothing too. But I loved what I was doing. But it's the society that's hurting you in there. It is not the fact of working, it is the organization of work, and creating the lag. It's very simple, all you have to do is look, you're left with just enough to live on, especially in France, no matter how much you earn. You just have enough to pay your bills, your rent as you say, your insurance, your stuff, your food. Discussion in the room, everyone talks. And it is not for nothing that today, those who are called the richest, are the ones who have enslaved the most people. We're in a world of predation. So the one with the most predation is the richest. It's as simple as that. Why did St. Francis of Assisi take over poverty? Because he was very rich. But because you understand when you live it, that all possessions, even justified in relation to your skills, your work, are only a burden. I know that, I was driving a sports car, I had a mansion, but, wow. I have never been as free as I am now, whereas when I had plenty of money, I was not free. It is the illusion of freedom, because you can buy things, you can afford a trip, you can afford a luxury car, you can afford a mansion, but freedom cannot afford it, it is an internal decision. But you cannot be inserted into society, especially Western society, and be free. That is not possible. You can deal with it. Some of them do quite well, because they manage to compose, to arrange spaces of freedom as you say, but there comes a time when, indeed, when you are really free, it is intolerable, societal pressure. The circumstances are not the same. So, Nizargadeo was working, he had no ashram, he had no students, he was working, he was a biter's seller. He had a wife, he had a family, he had children, but the societal circumstances of India in the 1980s have nothing to do with the societal circumstances we have in the West today, for example, where predation is total. We make you work to take your money. Look, it's simple. Sister, you talk about the withholding tax, you talk about what? I am talking about everything that is done by the societal organization, so that, whatever your salary, whatever your money, everything is done to deprive you of it. So you make a living when you're being taken away. Think about it. Sister, while there are some who put all their money into tax havens, things that are out of the legality, because precisely, the legal is taking everything from you. From my personal point of view, in relation to what I have experienced in my life, I have never, ever been as free as I am now. And especially not when I had money, or sports cars, or a castle. Because you're trapped by it. Because of course, as soon as you have something, such as a house, a car, or whatever, it costs money. Sister, and the more things you have, for example, the bigger the house, the more heating, the more maintenance, the more everything, the bigger the car, the more gas, the more insurance, and everything is like that. That's what greed is. What makes you think that is fear? What makes you think you need to pay your rent, need to work, is fear. Look at, first name, what he was telling you, he's not afraid, he doesn't work. Sister, You're afraid of not being cared for, in fact, of not being cared for rather than cared for, sister. No, to miss, the fear of missing. Now everyone is different. We are not asking everyone to stop working, or to resign, or to do anything. If you're in that place, that's the place you should be in. If first name is free from work, it means he should be free from work, and life will do everything to make him free. You broke everything. I was broken too. It's not a punishment, on the contrary, I know it's a huge reward. I'm free. So of course, sometimes there are feelings that can happen, lack, insecurity, but you're going through all this. Life provides for everything. I'm sorry, that is literally Christ's phrase. Does the bird care what it will eat tomorrow? Is the strict truth. When you care, not what you're going to eat tomorrow, because you already have food at home, but you have to care about what, pay your taxes, be able to pay your rent, pay your insurance. Have you been put under constraints that are totally anti-life, that feed who? Besides, only an elite. So you're enslaved, to your boss, your department head, to society, and to all the circumstances of this world. As I said, there is no space of freedom in there. As I said, there are some who can deal with it, but sincerely today, after all I have lived through, it is impossible to consider or imagine that I could be under the dependence or control of anyone, human or societal. So yes, I prefer, as my lawyer said, you're a marginal. Oh yes, I am completely marginal. I claim nothing but my freedom. And it is acquired precisely because I didn't put my finger on it, or I came out of it. But society's gears are terrible, we don't see it. And we consider it normal, today, indeed, to earn a living, pay rent, and be able to live. But it's a heresy. I'm not saying we should change and abandon all that, for those who are inserted in it, since you're in the right place. Sister, it is even shown as a model. Yes, of course. Sister, that's how you have to do to be good. And in fact, the true free can only be libertarian and anarchist. Sister, on the other hand, you just said that, in any case, for example, I'm in the right place, we're all in the right place. Yes, of course, it was the best place you could be to find freedom. For others, it must have been simply not being in society anymore. Discussion among all. All of a sudden, it's totally, but they're yelling at you, you'll see, you'll have to extract yourself or stay, it's life anyway, oh yes, it's life, but there's a decision to make, there's no decision to make, society creates obligations, creates responsibilities, creates predation. Society is only a system of predation. Moreover, they say it, with the Illuminatis, the Illuminati pyramid, the eye that sees everything, finally it is evident. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the French Revolution is the Illuminati pyramid. Freedom, equality, fraternity, it makes me laugh. Sister, sauerkraut, as Kelch used to say. Laughs. Especially in France, it is exactly the opposite, especially in France. So of course, at the beginning, when you were young, you need to find your place as you say, to represent yourself in the universe and in society. Brother, it's that simple, that's what you need. And it may not necessarily be different from what others are experiencing, it's just a context, it's a paradigm that's different. Maybe we'll stop there because it's 2 o'clock, and if we want to eat and not pick up too late, fair this afternoon. Through Jean-Luc Young. The Transformations. English translation, LMF.